May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. So you don't have to actually raise your hands, but I'm wondering how many of you made New Year's resolutions. And then I'm wondering, of those of you who make New Year's resolutions, how long do you tend to keep them? I myself have pretty much given up making New Year's resolutions because then I'm just disgusted with myself when usually about 3 weeks later I break them, and that's sort of the end of that. I think the fitness club industry knows our propensity for making New Year's resolutions if you watch television. And I myself, when I have belonged to fitness clubs, really just got angry those first weeks of January when the fitness club is chock full of people and you can't get on the machines you want and all the classes are full. But you just hang in there because you know in 3 weeks all those people will be gone, but they'll still be paying their money and the club will be quite flush for the coming year. I think we all have this sense, this feeling that we would like ourselves to be better somehow. And so we use things like New Year's resolutions or maybe some sort of Lenten observance to help us lose weight, stop smoking, eat better, exercise more often. You can put something in there that applies to your own life. Spend more time doing this, that, or the other thing. But these things, because they're made, I think, from outside pressure, we need to come up with some good resolutions, so we'll work on that. Or, Reverend Kelly said we need some Lenten observance, so I'll come up with something really good for myself this year and see if I can hang on for 40 days or not. But these things, I think, tend, if we are not truly committed to them, to be fleeting. Maybe you've made the same New Year's resolutions over and over and over, year after year after you're sure that this year is really going to be different. Somehow you will be changed forever by the New Year's resolutions this year. Our gospel lesson, however, gives us a little bit of insight into something I think is deeper than just a resolution. In Luke's gospel, that very first line of the gospel lesson we heard this morning said that Jesus and his family went up to Jerusalem as they did every year, as was usual for them. Some translations say as was their custom. Now, unlike us, they didn't hop on the local donkey train and trot up to Jerusalem. This was for them probably a 3 to 4 day journey on foot, probably through some dangerous territory, traveling about 15 miles a day and camping out in the evening. So we're talking about a trip for them that was a minimum of 2 weeks. A week's travel and then the time at the actual festival in Jerusalem. And they did this every single year. And that statement gives us a little bit of insight into Jesus and his family. One, they must have had enough money to sort of leave their home and their livelihood for a couple of weeks each year for a religious festival. But it also speaks to us of how devout Mary and Joseph were, how committed they were to raising their child as a faithful Jewish man. And Luke tells us that Jesus was about 12 years old, so he was right on the cusp of his bar mitzvah. Maybe he just had it. This could have been the first trip to Jerusalem after his bar mitzvah. Or perhaps he was preparing for it. And one of the things his parents may have been looking for would have been some sort of special blessing as he was getting ready for his bar mitzvah. But it tells us how important, how faithful their life was in God as faithful Jewish people that they went up every single year for the festival. And likely they observed all the rest of the festivals at home in their village with their local priest, gathering with their friends and neighbors for all of the smaller holy days that would occur throughout the year. They would take care to try and keep as many of those Levitical laws as they could, so that their life would truly be one focused and settled in God. This lesson is pretty much the only lesson in any of the Gospels that tells us anything about Jesus in between when he was born and when he got baptized. There isn't any other gospel stories, canonical gospel stories about Jesus. Matthew tells us that little bit about the wise men and then pretty much skips his baptism. John ignores the whole fact that Jesus was born at all, and it's as if he appeared fully formed at about 30 years of age and started his public ministry. Some of you have probably read some of the apocryphal Gospels or the extra-canonical Gospels. There's the Gospel of Mary and the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Peter and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. And they tell some other stories about Jesus as a young boy. There's one that said he was playing and he and his friends made a bunch of clay birds. And Jesus brings his clay birds to life and they fly off, to the wonder and amazement of his friends. There's another story that said a playmate of his got Jesus angry in some way. And when the boy fell down, Jesus said to him, "You'll never get up," and the boy died. And then Jesus brought him back to life. How true are these stories? I don't know. Scholars argue back and forth about, did Jesus know about his divinity from the very moment he was conscious, or did it sort of change as he got older? But there's all these other stories too that try to give us some insight into Jesus as a young boy. But this one gives us insight into his family life, presumably into his life a little bit as a boy. And it talks to us about their customs, the things that were really important to them. And just finishing our holidays now, I suspect almost all of you have observed some sort of custom over the last couple weeks. Something you always cook at Christmas time, or a way you decorate your house, or Christmas cards, or a special cake that you bake, or a party you always have. This time of year especially is very rich for us in things that we would call our customs. The things that in some way inform us about who we are, that ground us in the family we belong to, in our community, in our church, maybe even just a group of friends that gets together every single year on Boxing Day or New Year's Eve or something. Because all of these customs serve as our foundation. And that foundation, that custom foundation for Jesus, was rooted in the travel to Jerusalem, the religious festivals of his life. These were much deeper for them than just resolutions or promises that they made. They were the things that really changed them and sustained them year by year by year. So I've been wondering this week, because I of course thought again about making some New Year's resolutions, and then I knew I would just fall down on the job. So I decided not to start. But the question is, where are their customs for you? What are the things that ground you? What is your foundation? What roots you in your sense of who you are? Who you are in your family, who you are in your community or your church, who you are as a person of God? What sort of customs, what is usual for you as you live your life as a person of God? Where is your foundation? As this year begins, are there places that perhaps you do want to work on a little more seriously? Something that is not just a resolution that will go by the by in a couple of weeks, but some place where you've really looked inside yourself and said, there is really a place here that I would like to root myself, to dig a foundation, to place myself in my life, in my community, in my life of God, someplace that will transform my life in the coming year, that might even transform the life or lives of somebody else. We're all capable of creating these places in our lives. It doesn't matter what age we are. But they need to become something that is usual, something that is foundational, something that becomes a guide for us through our lives. But I think especially because we're sitting here in church, what are the foundational customs in your life in God? Is there another one that might help root you there? Is there one that will help you live more fully and deeply into a child of God? Is there one that will help others see you as that child of God? That will help them look at you and say, that's a really good person. That's somebody who clearly cares about others. That's somebody who knows about God, who knows about the spiritual life. It's more than just a resolution, but it's a commitment, something that can change us, something that will help us grow, something that will bring us more fully into the person God imagines us to be. Amen.